Howard was convinced that abortion this is one of those sins, who does not pray for anything. So Way and Bashi was the happy parents of 7 children, Mary, Andre, Cayetana, Lena and Arnaud, Carlos and Hector, everyone's favorite, who came into being when she was about 44. His nose Arxie, Hector some, except 4, they weren't named. Necessary to. Small one, native. This people just give birth, must at a certain time, but the older you are, when you have children, the better you understand what happiness is given to you. Yes, Ivana, and it was a lot of such happiness, but Hector, he was special to them, and for all older children too. Some of the neighbors twisted their fingers at the temple, a lot, where the brood is, especially given that, to the Howard family, to put it mildly, there are not enough stars in the sky. After all, today there are 1001 method of contraception, which can be customized, taking into account decisively all the characteristics of the body and age. But she just shrugged his shoulders. They were for the future family and considered, as long as there is health and the desire to continue the race. Well, God himself. Villa. Family lived in a large private house 10 kilometers from the city. This they got the house 13 years ago, as parents of 5 more children in the framework of one of the programs for large families. Such a present from the native state was very welcome. Then she was pregnant. USA and the vegetable garden were a great help, the benefit of the lazy family Howard not observed, and they tirelessly cultivated vegetables and fruits, and greenery. If the year was especially fruitful, something for sale in the market, and surpluses were often. Not because that they didn't eat anything, and therefore, that their garden was perfect, everyone took care of him, therefore, on one bed it was possible to grow something, that the neighbors and nozzles will not grow. Now eldest daughter, 25-year-old Maria, was born in the district hospital of the general practitioner. At all recently Maria got married recently, but don't think about children. And in this regard, her parents did not become an example for her, however she did not upset him at all. Maria wanted to make a career as a doctor, and mother and father, like any normal parent, sincerely wished success to the eldest daughter. The weather, Andre and Cayetana studied at a technical school. 20-year-old Andre studied law enforcement, and 19-year-old Cayetana banking. Young woman laughed. I'll get together to rob a bank, Andre will smear me, to which the brother always replied, swept away. C-string finished. Technical, boutique my family gang. 17-year-old Lena, honor student and family pride, this year I entered the institute at the Faculty of Mathematics. Will a 14-year-old Arnaud too over summer ovens and a 6-year-old Hector studied school. And this year the youngest went to 1st grade. Despite benefits and various programs for large families, family Howard life was not easy. Sometimes they barely made ends meet, but it seemed, members of a large and friendly family did not care about this aspect at all. Certainly, it's not quite right, because 6 children, students and school children need to be fed and clothed, which means there is no place without money and although Ivan worked, they rejoiced at any new opportunity to get money. But the fact remains, in this family, money was not a cult. Nicholas, you treated them calmly and certainly for weeks or people on the lowest and highest grade, depending on how much money they have. Even in this family they really knew how to sympathize with their neighbor. Yours is. Arnaud avid mushroom pickers were pleased. 2 full buckets of selected milk mushrooms, iPad poplar. Boys did not feel tired at all, for mushroom picking was their recreation, but they were not happy with washing and cleaning mushrooms. But what to do, the family loved mushroom caviar, pies, pancakes and mushroom soup. And break proud that the family owes these goodies. So they resignedly removed mushrooms from urine, and then, armed with knives and sponges, brought these gifts to the forest and into divine form. It's a shame, certainly, that it takes much more time to clean mushrooms than on their fees, but they understood. What does it help? Mom, then you need to cook for everyone, remove everything, wash. Mother was like a spinning top from morning to evening, and the boys were very proud that they could help her so profoundly. When the boys were losing weight, their attention was attracted by a fragile figure, the owner, who sat on a big stone, covering face with hands. At closer examination, it turned out that this old woman is so ancient, an old man, that it was difficult to determine her age. Grandmother looked at the boys with a haunted look. Such is the gaze of small children, who are afraid that a toy will be taken away from them or a grandmother will beat. "Are you okay?" Arnaud asked, scared. He understood that he is here, seniors decide him, so I decided that first you need to try to find out everything, what can, but soon realized that they don't know anything, so you need to make some other decision. The old lady suddenly started crying, and the boys were confused with him. They could not leave the old woman. One, because it was quite obvious that she needed help. "Yes, but how can I help her?" "Maybe B, and you got lost," hesitantly suggested Singing, and the elderly woman suddenly nodded timidly. She reminded them of a child, only grown old. "Where do you live?" the boy asked. He knew what was the most important thing. "Gatehouse, perhaps." The brothers exchanged shoulders. Her story. "It seems we will have to take the grandmother to us until the circumstances are clarified. She obviously is not in himself. Now we can't really help her here." "No," I nod. "Mom and Dad will figure something out." Drink was sure. He just knew for sure that there were no questions that Mom and Dad couldn't handle. They can all because they are parents. "Grandma, you can go out?" Arnaud asked. To the surprise of the brothers, the old woman finally voted, "I can walk slowly, lying down. And you won't notice. How are you coming?" "Quiet, you are going, you will continue." Seemed to talk to herself, but that grandma can walk by herself, instilled optimism in the boys. Is it true he was premature? No, they certainly understand that we are women of a very advanced age. It is difficult to go fast, but that doesn't make it any easier. The home was 2 kilometers away, and the old woman was clearly very tired. She started to stumble. The boys tried to support her, but heavy buckets of mushrooms greatly complicated this task. Already at the beginning of dusk, and on the mobile to both brothers, there was a message from the mother. "Where does he wear them?" Arnaud called my mother and assured her that everything is fine, and they will be soon. About the guests, he decided not to say anything yet. He was sure, what Mom won't say, drop it here and go home. But explaining something was just wasting time. The old woman could hardly move her legs. When they finally came to the house, she flung out her hands. "What didn't you warn? That we have guests I would be enough." In a quick fry, and this is their whole mother. She didn't care that the boys brought a stranger to the house, otherwise, that the guest needs to be properly fed. In the house only Mark needed can walking for. She turned to unexpectedly guests. Yes, Maria got hungry, ate very well. Only now she looked at the old woman more closely. She understood instantly that the woman was out of her mind. She suggested that the old lady's lost, but it didn't change anything. Now she needs to eat and rest, and everything else afterwards. Besides that, I need to take care of a place to sleep. Fortunately, there were no problems with this. I in the house had as many as 2 free rooms, so, previously occupied by girls, and Andre's room. She decided to put the woman to sleep on Maria's bed. Something told her. A strange guest here for a single day. A Cayetana and Holy can come for the weekend, and tomorrow is only Friday. The old lady ate concentratedly before eating, and also at the end of supper she quietly prayed. Hearty pancakes with rustic sour cream, bought on the market, did their job. Grandmother started to yawn, and her eyes closed. She led me to the bedroom and wished good night. Everything else in the morning. Conducted school, Arnaud sang with Hector, and husband to work. She took meat out of the freezer and put it to defrost for borscht, which she decided to cook for dinner. After she started peeling the vegetables. She preferred to do this, because there was a lot to cook. Yes, about God shouldn't have thought. Knife, who worked in construction, came very hungry and needed bodily food immediately. Except that, children promised to come, students and Maria. Wife. The guests were still asleep, and she was thinking how not to act. She, like sons, assumed that the old lady was lost. Idea, should have gone to the police, maybe, family, and looking for, if not then grandmother. It was to be put where it should be. This thought they seemed monstrous, because they are women, despite his venerable age, looked like a defenseless baby. And handing over to a state institution meant a real betrayal. It is so important to last night's family Howard didn't even know it existed. All of a sudden she heard soft footsteps. She looked back and saw the guard. She childishly shyly looked at Anna and obviously wanted something. "Kind morning," hostess said kindly. "Kind morning." Gatehouse smiled, like a child, sincerely, gentle. Children smile, when you don't know how cruel the world is. "I want to have breakfast," like a child. The guests were delighted. Into all. Toilet, yes, certainly. She took an elderly woman to the toilet, who was in the annex, and made her eat breakfast. She made her tea, imposed porridge, which was brought to eat in their family in the morning. "You because Maria institution." Grandmother nodded. "Where do you live?" She shrugged in confusion. "So similar, old woman, nothing they don't remember. Once upon a time she worked as a nurse, and she had to deal with old people, and even younger people, suffering from Mrs. Ward disease, which, usually, progresses. Certainly, quality drugs gave some progress, but in general the brain of the patient is degraded, that in this grandmother it is Mrs. Ward disease, she had no doubt. Naive childish look is very characteristic of the elderly, suffering from this disease. Maybe the elderly woman has relatives, who simply did not keep track of the sick old woman. And she was wearing a warm bathrobe, over which was a woolen jacket, slippers on feet, so it's quite plausible. But what if the relatives kicked out the old woman, become wagon traintio? Unfortunately, there are more than enough stories like this. In only one hospital, where she worked or vice versa, she ran away from them. So many questions the old lady obviously can't answer, cannot be found. So it's useless to ask. To what to innovate, need to think about something. About. Cold, nothing to guess. With time everything will become clear, she thought. One thing is clear with calls to government agencies, it is worthwhile to wait a while. For it would not be bad to start to clarify the situation. Maria, who arrived in the evening, confirmed, this woman really has Mrs. Ward, and clearly a long time ago. So the best, what can they do for her? Determine it in the hospital. There the woman will receive proper care, and she won't run away from there. There will be relatives. If will not be found, she objected. Ma'am, but anyway, that's not our problem. Grandmother, certainly it's a pity, but after all, you cannot keep her with you until the end of time. Callousness it has become, Maria reproached Oyo mother. No, I'm just trying to be reasonable. In hospital she'll get something, what is really needed, and this is not only an overnight stay and hot food. Then, you didn't think that she can leave you not to avoid, but just get lost. But because I'm at home all day, and you imagine, you cook soup, the path will slip into the toilet, and then you decide to admire the last autumn flowers. Then she and the family would return to the house. Well, he doesn't remember how to get through. And she comes to the neighbors, which I don't know, who is she? So where will they take her? After all, she can't explain anything to them. As she thought. Because daughter, right, is ready to take responsibility for a stranger. Acceleration, how? Eventually, she has 7 children, a beloved husband and elderly mother. 10 at least, my salt nursing home. It seemed, her blasphemy. What did she say to her daughter? Ma'am, I'm not suggesting to immediately transfer it to the caring hands of the state. Let's wait till Monday. I will make some inquiries through my channels, and then we will start to act. She agreed. Maria is quite grown, everyone is talking rationally, and offers a solution. They just empathize. They had no doubt that outside there would be a smart daughter. Karina didn't like the prospect of spending a week alone with a crazy old lady, but the husband had all her objections. Karina does not work means, may well take care of these old ladies, suffering from Mrs. Ward disease. Mainly don't let her into the yard alone. And ends, it's not his fault, that his nurse was ill, and now there is no one to leave Grandma with. Merrick, how about manicure, pedicure and others, capriciously stretched out Karina. I beg you, A week can go without it, at the same time, and put things in order. I would hire a house worker, once again the wife muttered. She actually put on that he will immediately hire. Woman cleaning and cooking 100% of everything I wanted to do. In general, she did not come out for Assange, we discussed it. You are not working, and you can wipe the dust and wash the floor. I wash the floor, Karina exclaimed indignantly. This Spikelet washes floors for millions of women, and you are angry? Brand. Karina's opposition was incomprehensible. Well, yes, he didn't mind, for the wife to stay at home, so that at the same time Doom hired female workers and general nonsense. Remember, dear husband, clean the floor. A lot of rogues, who do not have money for a house worker. Do you have them? Mark chuckled. You mean my husband, who just makes money, could afford to hire a housekeeper, ignored Karen's reproach. Brand just waved his hand. Karine, it is useless to explain many obvious things, in particular, that he does not draw or print money. Except that, another issue is now babysitting Grandma Mart. And so, Karen, this week you are sitting with your grandmother, and I will come from a business trip and bring you a lot of beautiful things, winked Mark. He knew which buttons to press. Brother, you are my trickster. Wife changed anger to mercy. But Ruth, I am looking after Grandma Mrs. Ward. Eventually, what are weeks, is it true? But here. AI Mark was very happy. It was his first business trip abroad, and the guy was very worried. After graduating 2 years ago, the Faculty of Economics of the capital's university, Mark chose to return to his hometown. His graduate with a red diploma was ready to take the farm, where he practiced. However, Brand had their own plans. Marc-Andre lost his parents early. When the boy was 11, they died in a car accident. All worries about stamps taken over by maternal grandmother, Mrs. Ward. Still quite a jaunty guardhouse, she with honor overcame all bureaucratic things and raised quite a worthy young man. After graduating school with only 2 4s, Mark decided to enter New York State University. He was not scared of the crazy competition, because the guy had a goal. When he finished his sophomore year, the family suffered a new misfortune. You grandmothers began to have memory lapses. Sometimes she did not recognize her grandson. Diagnosis was no comforter. Mrs. Ward disease. Doctor insisted on her stay in a specialized institution, but Mark didn't want to hear about it. But because you are a student, we'll run out summer, and you will go to New York. Who will look after her? Let's solve problems as they come. But the school year has begun, and Mark was forced to entrust his grandmother. States. Wife Uncle Velodia flatly refused to accept 2 more very. However, Mark, by agreement with the state institution, my grandmother took, when he came for vacation. After university graduation, Mark decided to become part of the family business, which his uncle, Mr. Clark, organized 10 years ago. Uncle sold medical equipment. His business from year to year went uphill. Relatives were very touched, and Merrick became the owner of the company. Boy said what would suit him as a manager, but Mr. Clark objected, and quote, we are a family business, which means that you, as a relative, will become one of the members of the leadership. You lead our new Ilya, here is the branch. But it's such a responsibility, marveled Mark. I did not count, because I have no experience. Suddenly I let you down. Experience, this is a living thing, and I, just in case, help. We are the same family, really, I just have to give you a place in the sun. Great, at least in memory of Brother Parker. But 2 years have passed since then, and the guy just did not let his father and uncle down, but also helped them make the farm more promising and prosperous. Soon Mark bought a 2-room apartment and a brand new Audi, but most importantly, took Grandma Mrs. Ward from a government agency. At this time all the brides lined up, because Mark was not only rich, but also good. A broad-shouldered brunette of medium height attracted many girls, but settled on the spectacular blonde Karina. Half a year back young people got married. Everything would be nothing, on Karina not being satisfied with the neighborhood with my grandmother. Young woman sincerely understood, but why Brand would not hand her over to the almshouse. But Mark categorically stated, grandmother raised me after how my parents died. She did not send me to an orphanage, and I believe it was not easy for her to defend me. Now it's my turn. Mark goes on a business trip, and she has to look after the old women. Cheerful perspective, don't say anything. Today in Karina by Bob. Yes, she is married, but there are so many interesting things in the world. Man business trip husband, but did not resist in advance with diamond series and a bouquet of 101 roses, once living, and the crazy old woman will still not understand anything. Thursday at 11 a.m. Karina stretched sweetly. This was a magical night. I don't let them both be free, why not fool around a little? She put on a dressing gown and went into the room, occupied by Mrs. Ward. Yes, but where is she? Karina went around the whole apartment in the gatehouse, not found anywhere. How it fell through the ground. So, tranquility, only peace. Today is Thursday, which means Mark will be back on Sunday. Grandma entered, but most likely at night, which means she can only file a missing persons report on Sunday. Karina didn't even think about it. What about the missing old man, mentally ill, she can say now. More precisely, she did not want to. But where could she go? And generally speaking, what went through her mind? Maybe she looked into the bedroom, saw how they had fun. Bob and grandmother felt sorry for the grandson of Data. Brad, Karina thought. She doesn't mean anything anymore. Maybe I forgot what it is. Lastly, the thought amused the unfaithful spouse, but in a second I was again not laughing. Mark, what is it? That commercials won't pat her on the head. There are beautiful things here, which he promised to bring her. Karina did not suspect how far from the truth, when I thought about it, that the old woman really spotted adulterers. For what Mrs. Ward looked into the bedroom, she doesn't remember anymore, but she really left home because of it. The old lady wanted to warn someone what happened in the matrimonial bedroom, but whom she herself does not remember. Mrs. Ward didn't remember. As it turned out, in the woods, separating high-rise buildings from private houses. Not remembering that too, how did it turn out to be a big house, whose hospitable hosts fed and I provided a bed. Gone already 2 days stay Mrs. Ward in this house, where, absolutely obvious, an atmosphere of ribbons and mutual respect reigns. Elderly, the woman was easy and good among these people, but something was bothering me. Sunday. Marc-Andre came back and states with Tom high spirits. He made a really serious deal and now felt like the king of the whole universe. Mark the Forest new level. On this occasion, he decided to throw such a grand party, something he never dreamed of. Mark invited all friends. He might not be happy with it. In America he came across Mark's chic sale, and scored a bunch of fashionable and high-quality things for your wife and grandmother. Only now he understands love Karina to shopping. The main thing is to start. Maybe he will go there with his wife. So obnoxious, but so beloved. In general, the trip was a success. At home he found Karina crying. Is it true Mark didn't guess that the stars were so false, but when he asked what was the matter, he himself was ready to sob out loud. But how did it happen? This is where it was sleeping she gone at night. But didn't you give her a sedative before bed? No, not given. I am not obligated. They remember what to eat before bed. Karina, yes, I asked you as a person to look after your grandmother. I told you, let's stage, the old woman in the almshouse and grief would not know. We noticed she, didn't fall anywhere. Brand barely resisted, so as not to close up the wife of slaps in the face. However, now is not the time to sort out relationships and emotions. When she went missing tonight to Wednesday to Thursday, humbly answered. With Wednesday to Thursday still broke Mark. I have been sitting all this time. And waiting for something. But 3 days had to pass. Passed. You called? No, I waited for you. What the fuck? Yes, you will know, that missing an elderly person, yes, an aging Mrs. Ward disease, you could immediately. Extreme case, could be on this bridge. Where to find it now? Not scream at me. He, without honoring the spouse with an answer, headed to the hallway. That where you were not at home for a week? Asked Karina. Karina, my grandmother is missing. Karina stood in front of him. Yours grandma still doesn't understand, and on opium plants you refuse to understand this. I am your wife. I've been waiting for you all week. And in the end you promised me gifts. Mark themselves. He carefully looked at his wife and could not even believe that he married this woman voluntarily. Although maybe she just feels like that she does not understand what he says. Karen, I understand, what are you upset about? She is also not serious. All talk, missing person. Maybe be, for so many days a man has already died. Mark swallowed, he was afraid to even think about it. You're not talking about clothes now. What's wrong? I repeat, your grandmother is clueless, she doesn't recognize you, so don't be too hasty. I am a living person. I see, what did you come? You don't care about me at all. Karina was going to cry for better effect, but Mark suddenly said, Bye, I'm gone, the house is to pick up things and leave the Maidan. She understood the brand of hand. You are serious, or are you scaring me like that? You decided to trade me for a crazy old woman. I'll take it and leave. And then I look at you, how will you beg for forgiveness from me on your knees? He pulled out his hand and above. Now he understood, what you are talking about was living under the same roof, he no longer wants to be with her. In searching Mrs. Ward involved not only law enforcement agencies, but also volunteers, but it was all in vain. Mark and I understood that grandma could go in absolutely any direction. She could not just get lost, could take the bus, could hit someone when she didn't understand, not oriented in this world, then she couldn't tell where she came from either. Search, no matter how good they are, may or may not lead to anything. Search practically useless in such cases. Here it remains only to rely on luck. Mark, I was already desperate to find out anything about my grandmother. This was such a terrible feeling. Knows that somewhere is bad for a loved one, and he wants, but can't help. On Tuesday, Brand, one of the hospital employees, called, said, and Amp, quote, What does he know about the location of the sick gatehouse? And Amp, quote, She in the hospital, asked Mark, even though it didn't matter. If grandmother found, then now the tone. I will do everything for that to help her. No, she is not in the hospital. The woman told the young man about where and how her brothers found Mrs. Ward. After talking with a young woman, who called him, Mark breathed a sigh of relief. The good ones haven't died yet, hardy people. Mark took the car keys, left the office. This Saturday, October morning, family Howard was on foot. Today it was Anna's birthday. The mother of a large family turned 50 years old, but looking at her, it was hard to believe. Thin, a mobile woman with delicate features could well pass for 35 years. Not. But it's not just the good genetics from this extraordinary woman from wanting inner light, which made her younger. Source of this inner light and kindness, and love for people, the ability to truly empathize, and willingness to help. Table has already been covered, it remains to wait for those few guests, which Howard invited to a celebration. Here, by the way, and they. In house entered Mark, his grandmother Mrs. Ward. Ivan helped an elderly woman take off her coat and led her to the table. You will be our guests of honor, announced the head of the family. Mrs. Ward smiled, like a little girl, receiving a gift, which she had long dreamed of. When all the guests sat down in their places and the owners of the house made their toasts, Mark took the floor. I am among family members, to which I am indebted. Months ago they sheltered a person dear to me, and I still consider myself indebted to them for the coffin of life. I now, on the birthday of the wonderful hostesses of this hospitable house, committing to support you, how I can, while I am alive. She was embarrassed, I give. We didn't do anything special, and you have done so much for us. When Mark came for Grandma, he gave the family Howard a very large amount of money. They refused to accept, but Mark insisted. They still remembered house stamps scared. Daughter after that, what did she call? Brand reported. Grandmothers immediately called and brought heavily to the patient, and she just didn't have time to call home and say that the grandson of Mars was found. When an expensive car stopped in front of the house with clouds of dust and a screech, she took to the streets. Something had happened. Maybe a man is just a paycheck, being late, That's why it's in a hurry. A young man got out of the car and immediately went to Oni. Where his the look was demanding. She was confused. Who this Mark understood, what it looks like in the eyes of this woman. Forgive me, I am Mark, grandmother's grandson, which you found. To me your daughter called. She smiled with relief. God, how did you scare me? She passed in the house. Merrick, I entered the house and immediately saw my grandmother. She sat on the couch and stroked a hefty red cat. On eyes filled with tears. Grandmother was clean. Quite satisfied. Grandmothers. The old lady froze, then turned to him. Mark, mine arrived. He hugged her by the shoulders. How as well, that nothing happened to her. Mark was calm now. That what bothered me, when right away, how she saw Mark. Is it true, she immediately forgot, what's his name, but it is not important. Mainly, that he is good and she loves him. I heard you have a big family, so what do you think? Money will help you, a life of tranquility. My grandma's things are priceless, so take this money, I'll just be happy. No persuasion did not help. She refused. Mark insisted. He tried to explain that money is still nothing like saving Granny. On birthday party Anna he gave her a table as a gift. Pony could be completely refurbished. Then they put a large gazebo for relaxation, plugged in money holes and even postponed it a little. Somehow immediately it became easier in their family. So I never fought over money, but had to find a job, so as not to experience a special lack of them. Now the head of the family could somehow spend the evening at home. Earlier this only happened in large. Holiday, by the way, hid from no one. Interested views ran towards Cayetana. Amazing, but even we smiled slyly at Karen's grandson, and he broke up. Later, some time after returning to Morocco, rumors spread around the house that Karina got in touch with someone Bob from next door. Mark didn't treat people who believed in everything. But one day, while walking, my grandmother threw an unkind glance to the side Bob and told her grandson that he came to them. I thought the words of an old woman, suffering from Mrs. Ward disease by and large, you should not take it for granted that it is a coincidence, not believe. But it's not even about that. Mark just realized, what are they Karina and not made for each other? Is it true, Karina, that I couldn't believe that he could just give up on her? She stayed at their house, didn't listen when Mark requested. These days he was just not up to it. Back home almost at night, he immediately understood that she was at home. This was unpleasant, but they swear, all the more he did not want to drive her out into the night. And he lay down in the office, but he did not receive any sound. Literally 10 minutes later the door opened. Expensive, are you here, Karina, talking like nothing happened. What I miss you so much. Karina was completely naked. And only now Mark understood what kind of person his wife was. Going out from my office. Mark, well, it's poison Kitty. She did not want to accept that he really doesn't want her anymore, 'cause she's still on something Mattel. When only Grandma came home, Mark filed for divorce. And only then Karina believed that it's all over. What soaked me off? She screamed such insults that even an experienced sailor could envy them during a storm. Grandmother frightened Pity, and Mark had to take her to the room. Soon he returned. I give you an hour in assembly, and if you don't want the neighbors to see how I give you, then you will go away. She saw that the husband was not joking and hissed, You give me everything, I am not going to live in poverty. Brand mentally thanked the lawyer, who insisted on drawing up a marriage contract. It was indicated that if they get divorced, not live a year, then everyone remains. What did you marry? He smiled. Karina is waiting for Zoe's surprise. I know he was staring with all his eyes at the pretty blue-eyed brown-haired woman, the daughter of the owners and by them. Here is this girl, that, what does he need? Is it true? I must admit I didn't have the strength. Mr. Divorced adult man. She is all so clean, beautiful, and tender. The year of the Andre family Howard, and we go to pick up from the hospital Cayetana and newborn Mr. Cook. Mark older, his uncle Mr. Clark were in seventh heaven. Was born another successor to the family business. However, If a girl was born, Mark, I would be glad no less. Certainly, now he has to take academic leave, but he believes that young spouses will certainly finish their studies, then go to college. For families Howard this year in terms of procreation in general turned out to be fruitful. Half a year back Maria also gave birth to a child. A boy called Adam. Andrei lamented, jumped his little sister. But he has a girlfriend, and as soon as Andrei becomes a certified law enforcement officer, proposes to her, and how his father will become the head of a large family. They already discussed this question with Zoe, and the girl doesn't mind.